I've been very skeptical of the idea that the Russian government hacked into the 2016 election or had any large impact on it, right? Now, there are Clinton supporters and some establishment Democrats that, of course, will disagree with that. Hillary Clinton, with her new book, says, oh, it's the Russians. It's always the Russians. They're hacked into our elections. It's Russia, it's Bernie Sanders, it's the Bernie Bros, it's James Comey, it's all this stuff, right? Now, look, I will disagree with that very, very strongly, as I have before, but there is some element of agreement that we do have in common, and that's the fact that there was a great deal of propaganda out there disguised as news. Now, a lot of people might call it fake news, whatever you want to call it. There was definitely a vested interest at spreading false information about different people in the election. There was some about Bernie Sanders, a lot of it coming from the establishment media, but then there was also some that came from very sketchy sources that were used a lot on the right wing. Now, okay, so the way that it involves Facebook is very interesting. Facebook just recently disclosed that it identified more than $100,000 worth of political ads purchased by a corporation in Russia. Oh, that's very interesting. Now, that very corporation happens to also be linked to the Russian government, and these ads were ran in the election in 2016. Now, look, let's be honest, this shouldn't be too surprising to a lot of people. Governments do propaganda all the time, right? We do propaganda. Hell, we insert ourselves into foreign elections and have even overthrown governments. Nonetheless, this does add a little bit more validity into the narrative that the Russian government did favor at least one political ideology over the other. Now, I say ideology because, as the New York Times explains, most of the 3,000 ads did not refer to particular candidates, but instead focused on divisive social issues such as race, gay rights, gun control, and immigration. Interesting. My guess is that the Russian ads weren't necessarily in favor of gay rights and gun control. Just a thought. Now, the ads, which ran between June 2015 and May of 2017, were linked to some 470 fake accounts and pages that Facebook said they had shut down before. Now, these fake accounts, they trace them back to a Russian company called the Internet Research Agency. Now, this agency happens to be known for using troll accounts to post on social media and comment on news websites. So these are your David Brock paid trolls, except they're the opposite of the David Brock paid trolls, because the David Brock paid trolls, their the $1 million troll army was there putting out pro-Clinton propaganda, and now you have a Russian company paying trolls to put out anti-Clinton propaganda. So you got propaganda on both sides here going on. Now, what makes this very interesting is how this ties into the bigger investigation headed by Special Prosecutor or Robert Mueller, right? Now, Facebook staff members on Wednesday briefed the Senate and House Intelligence Committees, which are investigating the Russian intervention in the American election. Mr. Stamos, who is somebody who works for Facebook, indicated that Facebook is cooperating with investigators for Robert Mueller as well, the special counsel, not special investigator, special counsel. Now, he wrote that we have shared our findings with U.S. authorities investigating these issues, and we will continue to work with them as necessary. Now, what exactly would that mean? Well, in this scenario, if the Trump campaign or anybody related to it paid the company to do propaganda on their behalf, well, that would be very interesting. They would want to know about this case. Now, what would be more interesting is if there were certain Russian billionaires that did the same thing. Now, if billionaires that were not American citizens, and it doesn't matter if they're billionaire, if they're not an American citizen and they decided we're going to pay a company to do propaganda, political propaganda on these issues or any political issue around a campaign time, well, that would be illegal under federal law. Since foreign people cannot put money into elections, and since money is now considered speech here in America, if you put any sort of money into a political campaign, whether it be to speak on behalf or against certain issues or certain candidates, you are involved in the political process. And if you're a foreigner, you're not supposed to do that. Okay? So, now, when it comes to certain Russian billionaires, well, Donald Trump happens to have done a lot of business with some of them. People like Felix Sater. Now, Felix Sater has tried to work with Trump on a Moscow hotel deal, right? And even had an office inside of Trump Tower. Now, Sater had previously been convicted of money laundering through real estate for the Russian mafia. Now, you also have Ares Agalarov, who, along with his son Aaron, convinced Trump to hold the Miss Universe pageant in Moscow. So you have some of these Russian billionaires that also happen to be very friendly with the Putin government. You don't get to be a billionaire in a corrupt government without the government's blessing. Okay? And look, if they together decided to fund some of these ads, that would be illegal, right? Especially if they did it on behalf of Donald Trump. Now, that's just one of the possibilities that Mueller happens to be looking into. Now, Paul Manafort also ties into this as well, as he also has a lot of these connections and have made these connections. And now that's, of course, why the special counsel is leaning on him very, very hard. If anybody knows of a possibility of a deal, it would be Paul Manafort. And so here's Mueller looking into the truth to try to build a case against Mueller. Now, if you believe the January intelligence reports, which of course I've been skeptical of some of the findings on that, but they did say that the likely financier of the Internet Research Agency happens to be a close Putin ally with ties to Russian intelligence, but they're unnamed in this report. So do we know that for sure? Not necessarily. But if it is, again, this would be illegal under U.S. law. Now, does that mean we bomb the shit out of them? No, absolutely not. Does this validate Hillary Clinton's claim that the Russians cost her the election? Absolutely not. None of this says any of that. In fact, Hillary Clinton will still be the biggest reason that Hillary Clinton lost the election. No amount of excuses will overshadow that. She ran a terrible campaign. Now, to show you that, let me give you some numbers here. All right. So $100,000. That's actually not much when it comes to ad spending, especially even on Facebook, right? Facebook's total revenue for ads in 2016 was $45 billion. So when it comes to the grand scheme of things, this $100,000 from this Russian company, that's actually very, very little, okay? And it probably had almost no effect on the electorate, but nonetheless, it's still against the law. So, and look, it also shows their priorities, right? Now, the New York Times looked into this company in 2015, right? And basically, it is a St. Petersburg company that uses a small army of trolls to put out messages in support of Russian governmental policy. Now, look, Russian governmental policy is actually very right-wing. It's very anti-LGBT. Right now, there's a crackdown of gay people in Chechnya, right? You also have the government being very pro-fossil fuel, and not only that, but they're against press freedom. You happen to see a lot of journalists being locked up in Russia as well, and not only that, but a lot of Putin's political opponents, mainly from the left, seem to have this nasty habit of randomly dying. It's kind of weird. But anyway, you also have a lot of these billionaires that are connected to Putin and the Russian government. Well, they also happen to have been accused long before the election of money laundering through real estate deals in New York. So there seems like there's a bit of a connection there. But what I'm trying to point out is the Russian government is massively corrupt and authoritarian right-wing. Again, does that mean we attack them? Does it mean they go to war? No, absolutely not. Nobody, like, I'm not advocating that, and I would hope that most people don't advocate for that, because that would be ridiculous and incredibly dangerous. But you can't look at the Russian government as if it's not an actor that's looking out for its own interests. Of course it is. And it just happens to be incredibly right-wing as well as corrupt. Now, if you're a right-wing authoritarian government, who do you think you'd want to support in an election? Who would you rather deal with on the world stage? What, you think they'd want to see Bernie Sanders win? Look, I know there's a lot of Clinton people out there that think so, but come on. On a lot of policy, the Russian government is very conservative. Now, whether the government, and this is the real question, whether the government greenlit these trolls and actually paid for these trolls, well, that remains to be seen. Or that even Trump had a hand in it, right? And that's what the investigation is actually looking into, okay? That's what they're trying to find out. Now, personally, I do believe that there is some sort of financial deal. I know there's no proof of it, and I concede that openly. But I do believe Trump, possibly through Paul Manafort or someone else, was probably approached for a deal, right? Hey, you help us, we help you. Dumbass Trump probably didn't realize it was illegal and maybe made the deal anyway. Again, that's my speculation, right? But that's what I'm leaning towards. Again, I don't have anything to prove it. Baseless speculation based on what I know anyway. Now, there's one more thing that I found very interesting, and it deals with how the ads were targeted. On Facebook, what you can do is you have some very granular controls. I know I have a Facebook page where you can buy ads, and you could target them towards certain people, certain demographics. It can get very granular, right? Now, the Post asks whether operators would have needed any guidance from American political experts. Facebook said that some of the ads linked to Russian accounts had targeted specific geographical areas, which may raise questions about whether anyone had helped direct that targeting. Now, if they find that they were targeted in places like, I don't know, Michigan, Wisconsin, that would prove to be compelling. Although ultimately, I still hold to the belief that these ads weren't very effective overall. But nonetheless, they could have had some effect on maybe a few people in those areas. I don't really know. But the thing is, the important thing here, to glean from that little excerpt here, is the fact that they maybe could have had some help from American political consultants or possibly people on the Trump campaign. And if so, well, that happens to be collusion. And in this case, if it involves monetary transactions, as these Facebook ads clearly do, well, that would be illegal. That would be a serious violation of law. And so that's why it might be a big deal for the Mueller investigation. That's why Mueller would likely look into it. And if it all ties back to Trump, well, then that is, as they say, that. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.